This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. We're pleased to announce that we are now selling our physical magazines directly on our website. You can browse by magazine title or search for a particular issue using the search bar. To pay us a visit, please click the link in the description. Enjoy. Pierre Laverdure, a Bois Brûlé, one of the Métis, often called landless Indians, never worried about owning land. He had something far more valuable, a gold mine. His claim was known by many names over the years: the Lost Keys Mine, the Lost Nepi Mine, and the Lost Mine of the Little Rockies. That last name was misleading, for the mine wasn't in the Little Rockies at all, but hidden in the rugged breaks along the north bank of the Missouri River, not far from Rocky Point. To Pierre, though, the mine was never lost. From 1872 until his death in 1904, it provided for his every need. He was the last man to draw gold from that hidden lode. Others had come before him. 3 men in particular were known to have carried identical gold, clearly from the same source. Among the earliest arrivals at the Last Chance diggings were John Lepley and Chris Keyes. Their journey to the strike had been paid for with 4 milk cows, given in exchange for helping 2 families travel from Fort Benton. Though meager compensation at the time, the animals became the foundation of Lepley's future in Montana, and indirectly led to the death of Chris Keyes. Lepley and Keyes began selling milk to miners, supplementing their claims and making a modest living. But Chris was restless. Tending cows and scratching out a living from milk sales was no life for a young man eager for fortune and adventure. Keyes was the sort who always had to see what lay beyond the next ridge or across the next stream. His impatience grew until he persuaded Lepley to carry on the business alone while he struck out in search of something greater. They agreed he would take the winter for himself, to trap, prospect, or simply wander. So in the fall of 1864, not yet 19, Chris saddled 1 horse and packed another with supplies, then headed north. Fort Benton was the only settlement of any size between the Last Chance diggings and a Fort Union at the confluence of the Missouri and Yellowstone rivers. There, Chris lingered for a few days, drinking, gambling, and making acquaintances before continuing down the north side of the Missouri. He prospected as he went, encouraged by saloon talk that promised gold along those banks, if a man managed to survive long enough to find it. But the land belonged to the Piegan, and their Gros Ventre allies were even less tolerant of intruders. They killed white men whenever they found them. Still, Chris was young and knew little of fear. Somewhere near Rocky Point, he struck gold, and plenty of it. He spent the winter there, and when spring came, he returned to Fort Benton with a rich haul of coarse gold and even several chunks of raw ore. Upon his arrival, he rode immediately to Lepley, enclosing one of his specimens, a jagged 4-ounce piece that looked as though it had been freshly cut from a vein. He told Lepley the strike lay near Rocky Point, but nothing more. Instead, he urged his partner to come to Fort Benton at once. John Lepley was eager to join his partner and share in the strike. He quickly made arrangements for the care of their herd, now 7 head strong, and purchased a ticket for the stagecoach that would pass his door the following morning. Yet the long night ahead gave him too much time to think. He knew the country north and east of Fort Benton was a constant battlefield. The Piegans, Bloods, and Gros Ventre were at war with the Sioux, Crow, Cree, and Assiniboine. For any white man caught between, there was little mercy. Lepley valued his hair, and he knew full well how easily it might be lifted. But it wasn't fear alone that kept him back. Their small milk business, which had grown steadily through the winter, still belonged as much to Keyes as to him. Why not let Chris chase the uncertain riches of gold, while he tended to the quiet trickle of money that could, slowly but surely, make them both comfortable men? He spent the night before the fire staring at the specimen of gold ore Keyes had sent him. Toward morning, exhaustion overtook him, and in his half-sleep it seemed a voice whispered, "Stay with the herd. The herd will take care of you." When the stage rattled by at dawn, Lepley made no move to rise. He simply fed the fire, packed his pipe, and listened as the six-horse team clattered northward without him. That decision preserved his life. In the years ahead, John Lepley became one of Montana's well-known stock growers, a wealthy and respected man, while his partner, Chris Keyes, met a far different fate. Keyes did not linger long for Lepley's arrival. A few days after the stage passed without word, he fell in with two companions, Ed Sharp and Duncan McGregor. Both were hard, seasoned men of the upper Missouri, reckless, daring, and like many trappers of their breed, they had taken Piegan wives. They refused to leave their women behind and soon persuaded Keyes that he too should not travel alone. An arrangement was made, and soon 6 souls, 3 men and 3 women, set out in a hastily built Mackinaw boat, riding the swift current of the Missouri toward what Keyes believed was his hidden El Dorado. Their progress was good and spirits were high. Each night they camped along the river, eating, talking, and resting on buffalo robes spread before the fire. The two trappers swapped stories of buffalo hunts and beaver streams. Keyes, proud and eager, spoke of his discovery. He described the richness of the ledge he had uncovered, producing chunks of ore he had hacked from it. He even pointed out the small, nameless creek where the treasure lay, saying it was about a day's journey by river, though it had taken him 2 days by horse. One of his companions translated this for the women, who listened intently. That night, feeling safe, they set no guard. They had seen no Indian sign for days, but along the Missouri, unseen eyes had marked their passage. The first rule of the frontier was one the young gold seeker had yet to learn. When you don't see Indians, it's only because you aren't looking hard enough. For the Piegan war party that had tracked their passage, the little camp was an easy mark. They crept close under cover of night. And by dawn, the strike of Chris Keyes was silenced forever. The secret of his rich discovery in the winter of 1864-65 died with him. John Lepley never doubted that his young partner had indeed found a valuable lode. Evidence lay not only in the gold Keyes had carried into Fort Benton, but also in events that followed. In 1868, during Thanksgiving at Old Fort Browning on the Milk River, an Indian named Neepy appeared with a small sack of gold. Officers of the post were hosting a dinner, attended by several men who would later leave their mark on Montana history. Among them were Captain D.W. Buck, James Stewart, and Major Culbertson. They all saw Neepy's gold and listened as he explained it came from the breaks north of the Missouri. But Neepy refused to give its location. He insisted it was a tribal secret, one that, if revealed, would cost him his life. Even when pressed in the dining room by the officers and guests, he held his silence. At last, he gifted the sack of gold to Major John Simmons in gratitude for past favors. Rumor long swirled that one man, Joe Hontus, better known as Buckskin Joe, knew the site. He and Neepy were close, called blood brothers by some. They hunted together, lived together, and even fought side by side. No one was closer to Neepy than Joe. Years after that Thanksgiving, while drunk, Hontus claimed he knew where the gold lay and vowed he would go to it. A few days later, he left Fort Browning. He was never seen alive again. His bullet-riddled body was later discovered by meat hunters in the breaks near Rocky Point. Old-timers always believed he had wandered too near the source of the gold and paid for it with his life. When Neepy died in 1876, he carried with him the last hope of any Indian ever willing to share the secret with outsiders. And yet, the trail of the mysterious Lode did not end there. In 1884, an old Métis named Pierre Laverdure appeared on the Crow Reservation. He arrived with 5 horses, 2 of them heavily laden. A Crow friend helped him unpack, remarking on the weight of the bundles. Pierre only smiled and said they should be heavy, for they carried the rest of his life inside their parfleche covers. Years later, in 1900, Pierre gave a sample of their contents to William E. Bowman. It was gold. Assayers who compared it with the sample Neepy had given Major Simmons decades before found the two to be identical. Bowman devoted the next 5 years to the breaks north of the Missouri, searching for the lost Lode. He discovered gold, yes, but never again of that same peculiar character as Pierre's sample. Many dismissed his efforts as a wild goose chase, but he held a secret weapon, a hand-drawn map. Old Pierre himself had sketched it from memory, tracing the path he had once followed under the guidance of his pagan wife, Green Snake Woman, who had died in 1872. Pierre claimed to have made the journey 3 times, first in 1872, again years later, when he needed money after his son and daughter-in-law were murdered by a hide hunter, and once more, when he secured enough to live out the rest of his simple life. By the time he passed in 1904, he was the last man known to have drawn gold from the mysterious Lode. With him, the trail went cold, and the lost mine of the Missouri Break slipped forever into legend. Perhaps Pierre Laverdure's memory had failed him, or perhaps he had deliberately misled Bowman. Whatever the case, Bowman did manage to find gold each year during his searches. He never publicized his discoveries. Instead, he quietly shipped the gold directly to the mint in San Francisco, where it was refined and the money deposited into his Wells Fargo account. When Pierre died in 1904, Bowman made one final attempt to locate the hidden Lode. This time, he failed. Yet by then, Bowman had already secured enough wealth to establish himself as a cattleman. He leased land on the Crow Reservation and later purchased holdings in northern Wyoming, settling into a prosperous life. Still, the gold remained somewhere in those broken lands. The trail began with Chris Keyes in the winter of 1864 to 65, when he first brought coarse nuggets and ore to Fort Benton. 13 years later, Nepi carried a matching sample to Fort Browning. Decades after that, Pierre Laverdure's gold was found to be identical to both. 3 men, 3 samples, all from the same mysterious source. Since then, no one has ever produced gold of that exact character again. And so it seems that Pierre Laverdure, the old Métis who lived out his days quietly on the Crow Reservation, was the last man to draw treasure from the lost mine of the Missouri Breaks. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.